Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner of the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves COOL. You can learn everything you ever wanted to know about COOL right here on our website at cool.us, CEWL.us. There you're going to find all the live streams we do, all the information on our COOL Induction Institute led by Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder, opportunities for induction teachers to get free one-on-one coaching, information on the retreats that we do, all of the member-led content that's been created and written, like Pete Stone's Cool Vibes and Steve Newsom's Cool Views and Cool Yoga, and just a whole bunch of resources there. So I want everybody, if you are watching, just to check out our website and feel free to contact us if there's any way we can support you. And of course, we wouldn't be here without a grant from the National Education Association and our state affiliate, the SCEA. And if you're interested in joining the only union for educators in the state of South Carolina, you can go to jointhescea.org. And one of the great things about membership with the SCEA is we're the only organization where you're actually joining three organizations. You're joining the National Education Association, the South Carolina Education Association, and your local association. So if you're in Greenville, there's the Greenville County Education Association. And we believe that advocating for public schools on all three levels is essential if we're going to create the kind of schools that educators and their students deserve. So we hope that you'll consider joining us at jointhescea.org. Tonight, we're going to be talking about something that is really, I feel, of critical importance to educators, and that is creating trauma-sensitive spaces. And I'm really excited to have our guest tonight. He's a trauma-responsive, culturally competent servant leader who prioritizes collaborative, discovery-based learning for K-12 and higher education staff, students, and families. Also a passionately creative, critical thinker and solution maker with over 30 years in education and the arts, who seeks to balance equitable social emotional supports with empowering student resilience, compassion, mindfulness, and academic exploration. So without further ado, here is Dr. Matthew Bowerman. How are you tonight, Matthew?
I'm doing very well, Todd. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And, I for those who don't know, you can search Matthew's name and read some of the articles he wrote. There's a couple that have been in Edutopia. And, Matthew reached out to me because I think we have some aligned purposes, our Venn diagrams in terms of what we're trying to do overlap quite a bit. Is there anything in the? I introduced you, and I know I always feel awkward when people introduce me. It doesn't really tell the whole picture of who I am. But for those listening tonight who want to get to know you a little bit better, can you kind of augment what I read in the beginning there?
Oh yeah, sure. I think probably to be honest, I think my greatest role is being a husband and father. And I think everything comes probably from that. I have 6 kids. Very blessed in that way for every single one of them. A lot of learning there, a lot of neurodivergence there. All at different places in their lives and at different places in school, and also as well as being a husband. These dual roles, I think, help shape so much of what led me into becoming an educator and have kept me in those spaces. And what kind of helps me prioritize a lot of my work now. I'm a school administrator in middle school in here in Maryland, and that's in the Montgomery County Public School System. I'm also a professor at Bowie State University, where I teach in the graduate programs there around mental health for youth, children, and school staff. And so I think so much of my work kind of definitely intersects with yours and the organizations you're attached with, and certainly all of my work kind of just is synergized around my belief in the whole child and really trying to find every possible way to, support and safeguard students and families in those types of healing-centered and trauma-responsive ways.
Yeah. When obviously both of us got into education and something called us into that field, let's start there with what it was that called you into the field of education.
Um, I didn't start as an educator. My background is as a professional actor, singer, dancer. Um, International and national performance around the country, performing. Went to school for all of that. Worked with a lot of kids, doing workshops and trainings, kind of teaching and being a dance teacher, theater teacher, like kind of working in that world. The arts had saved my life growing up in so many ways. And while I loved learning significantly, really struggled in school and really did not um, find a lot of safety or trust there. And however, as I kind of drifted through, I did find two educators in the arts, Dr. Tony Anthony Leach and Dr. Marvin Lushke, both who aren't with us anymore, but they loved me into better versions of myself, challenged me, elevated everything about me, affirmed just who I was, and helped me kind of define and identify myself, and led me to just much safer places. And I think when I looked back on like career decisions and ideas, um, when I was first going to be a dad and wanted to kind of give back in a different kind of way, and chose education, it was my memories of them, my love of them, and what they had given me, and how they had nurtured and in essence educated me to say that that is it, that I would love to try to find in myself as a human being, as an artist, maybe as an educator, to give back to other kids and communities, maybe with similar backgrounds as mine, similar experiences. Um, and that kind of led me on the path to really kick things off.
Yeah. So one of the interesting things is when you do this kind of work in terms of mindfulness or trauma informed education, um, it seems almost invariably that the people that I know who've really kind of gone deeply into that work, there was something that kind of led them there. I'll just share my personal story real quick because this isn't about me, but I was dealing with, as an early career educator and becoming a father for the first time, was dealing with a lot of stress and just feeling overwhelmed, and led to being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and went to a therapist who recommended mindfulness. And I'd heard about that. I'd heard about meditation and mindfulness, but I'd never really adopted the practice for myself. And then when I did, when I adopted that practice, it started to help me unravel that anxiety that I was feeling, and that just constant feelings of being stressed out and overwhelmed. And so over time, when I learned about the neuroscience, the psychology behind it, I just found it fascinating and had a personal sort of uh, uh, just experience with that. And so then I wanted to go out and share it with others, especially educators who I saw dealing with the same kind of stress. And so that led to us developing retreats, and then developing the center. And then the whole reason why we're having a live stream tonight is just around that work of trying to bring these healing modalities to educators uh, who are so often the just being exploited and overwhelmed, and just dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of the different things that are being put on their plate. Can you sort of talk a little bit about what drew you into this kind of work, not just education, but into these healing centered practices, and why you think they're so important for not only you but for all educators?
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing your story. I think you appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty, I must say. And I also, you touched upon something I think we see across the country. Um, you know, People in education, from your paraeducator to your teacher to your school administrator, are trying to bring so much to the experience of K to 12 school every day, and pour so much of themselves into people, children, families, and the bandwidth, the energy and emotional commitment that takes, working trauma adjacent, and the compassion fatigue that creates. And the bandwidth gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you see that anxiety, that fatigue, that burnout, that weariness, that fragility, just that kind of like holding onto the edge, as it were, while trying to show up every day, compassionate, kind, resilient, energized. We just have seen such a toll on educators in these spaces, creating so much of that, social emotional distress. Um, and it just really it made me think a lot about that. But um, I mean, for me, I kind of mentioned a little bit of the kind of the running theme for myself when I was just speaking a few minutes ago. But I loved school. I mean, I love learning. I just didn't feel safe. Um, and I came from a very young age, a pretty significant amount of uh, sexual abuse and physical abuse. Um, and there were pretty significant pieces of it that happened in school environment. And those who I had thought as a little boy were, I guess, sworn to, promised to, contracted to protect me, safeguard me, were the very monsters that were prowling,
Mm.
um, in various spaces. And I was struggling with a lot of my own neurodivergence in the school environment, trying to make sense of a lot of things. And as I kind of pinballed around in all of that, when they came prowling, I mistook a lot of that, not understanding what was being whispered, what was being touched, all these things that were happening to me, and created a lot of attachment disordered behavior that, like, I mistook that for I must they must like me, they must love me, someone must want me in that way, like love me in that way. And so it just made me more vulnerable for a repeating cycle of those abuse patterns um, for an exceedingly long time in my life. And much like you now, I've done a lifetime of work on trying to understand, repeat, repair, and heal, from those places. But I think so much of that, many of our children and grown up adults now have found, unfortunately, in their stories and live often, as I know I did, dysregulated lives. Um, and some get help, some don't. Um, but it really led me in the work to want to write about it like I did in my book, to try to teach to it, about it, to try to create spaces that support it, to try to find ways to connect with staff and families and the children that I was serving in ways that really were about, not just like, um, not just kind of the trauma responsive about what's happened to you, what's going on, but kind of the healing centered of, now that I know what's happened, what do you need now? And what can we do next? And where am I in this place to try to work with you to operationalize love in ways that I didn't feel like were healthy or functional for me and abnormal? How can I normalize that love, break the stigmas of it, and use it in these healing centered, trauma responsive ways, et cetera, especially in these trauma adjacent spaces, and try to kind of reverse the course of my experiences by getting the training, the skills, the approach, and then my own mental health as well, to engender myself to work in those ways, and to also be in school communities that had those needs, and then try to also, like you mentioned, write about it, explore about it, research about it, um, to try to make positive impacts. It's trauma's not the exception; it's the context. Um, like we're not waiting in our K to 12 schools for trauma to show up. It already has. It already lives there. Like,
Right.
growing up, I didn't have any of that, but the monsters were already prowling. They were already seeking. They were already hungry. They were there before me. They were just waiting for someone or something. I happened to fall into their jaws. They happened to be under my beds, in my closets, in the places that I thought I was going to learn. And I ended up learning very different lessons. And I wanted to break those cycles for myself and learn from them, and then try to do all I could, I guess, just all I could, to try to create new experiences of love and safety and trust, and joy, for children that had escaped me.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing all that. I know
Sure, sure.
that's difficult for to recollect that and to share that. And as you said, I appreciate the vulnerability. One of the things that I think happens is anytime there's a buzzword in education, and trauma informed has become kind of it's been a kind of a buzzword, and I hate to even reduce it to that because I don't think it is a buzzword. I think it's just, like you said, finally schools recognizing that trauma exists and that it is a barrier to students reaching their full potential. But one of the things that I think happens is people want to package that into a training in how to manage trauma in their students. And I don't know how much is actually being done for educators to manage their own trauma. And without that piece, I don't know that they can be effective at working with the students' trauma. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of training for educators in a way that it doesn't automatically just immediately go to students, but helps them on a personal level learn the ways to heal their own wounding, and so that then they can show up for students in a way that's going to be helpful instead of actually creating more trauma.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could just to note it, because I've researched it and written about, I wrote about this in my book, and it's a really big thing for me. Exactly to your point, and I speak about this a lot when I go out and do my trainings and all that kind of stuff. It's a really hard thing. I usually ask adults to lean into this thing I'm going to share with you that I share with them. I start off with this: unhealthy adults harm children.
Yeah.
No program, no tool, no policy, no practice is as good as relationships. Those are the key intervention. But to build those from an authentic place where you're working to develop trust, establish it, maintain it, elevate psychological safety, and seek connection with a person, you have to be healthy first. So I
Hmm.
call it origin building. And when I'm writing, when I write about it and when I do speaking, that you have to understand your own origin first. You and I both shared some elements of the chapters of our stories. Mine doesn't make me any better or different than anybody else. Um, we're all out there in the trenches of this work, kind of quote unquote fighting the good fights in all kinds of different ways, whether we're driving a bus, whether we're doing, small group instruction, crushing it as a paraeducator, whether we're a kindergarten or a fifth grade teacher, a high school English teacher, or a cafeteria staff member. There's opportunities at every point to create relationships as the key intervention with kids. But unless you're doing work to figure out who you are, what you're about, what you've come from, what's impacted you in loving, positive ways, what's created damage, what's created, where are your unmet physical, social, emotional needs? Because no program outperforms a regulated, attuned adult.
Right.
So like trauma sensitive schools, trauma informed, trauma responsive, healing centered, the investment really is in our people and how they deal with, how they work with, how they collaborate with, how they support children. Every interaction then is an intervention, but you have to do whatever work it is for you. It might be doing grounding exercises every day, breath work, grounding from the feet up or the head down, body work, body scans, doing something in that world of mindfulness, because the intersectionality around mindfulness and trauma and healing are critical to really understanding oneself in terms of your own journey, your own trajectory for how you land every day in the classrooms to show up on that given day to your most healthy. And there are going to be days, many of them, where you're not feeling your best, or you're really struggling with anxiety or trauma, and backstory and things like that. And that's okay, as long as you're doing work to get clean, to get healthy, to heal, and from those places make changes so that you are doing work that is regulated and you're not creating impact that negatively hurts, harms, re-triggers, creates, triggering in the children of which you serve.
Right. I think that some people, they're aware of what they've been through in their life, obviously, but they're not necessarily. I know for me anyway, they're not aware of the sort of these unconscious patterns that come up as a result of what's happened to them in childhood and kind of who they became. And a lot of really great work being done in IFS. I don't know if you've heard of IFS,
I do.
Richard Schwartz.
Richard
Um,
Schwartz.
so there are these different parts of us that are developed in childhood, and we just have always had those parts with us, and we've had these certain patterns of behavior that have always been with us and just seem normal to us, and we're not even aware of the fact that of like how they play out in the way we cultivate those relationships with a spouse, with their own kids, let alone with students that come into the classroom. And I think that one of the things that for me in creating trauma sensitive spaces, one of the key elements is to have those educators start to become aware of what has been unconscious, and that does require a great deal of work, whether it's through therapy and just sort of self-reflection, is and seeing those patterns come up. So for example, sometimes sometimes your anger towards a student might just be a triggering of that part of you that feels defensive, and you think it's totally justified and normal. And this isn't to throw judgment at educators, because it's such a hard job, and being human is challenging enough, and being responsible for 25 or 30 humans and their trauma and things that trigger them. It's a really complicated dynamic. But can you talk about the importance of and how an educator can start to sort of see those unconscious patterns and the parts of themselves that might be showing up in ways that aren't conducive to a trauma sensitive space?
Certainly. Certainly. And you hit on some really important things. I will say first, to tie back to one thing, I kind of break down some of these terminologies, these labelings and things that you were referencing. A trauma sensitive kind of person, you start to be aware, right, that trauma exists in yourself or around you in one form or another. And when I teach and talk about it, we look at acute, chronic, and complex trauma frequently, or direct and vicarious. But around you, sensitivity and awareness. From that level, you kind of move into the trauma informed. I'm getting information. There might be trainings, things I'm reading to try to begin to build my capacities in terms of understanding, approach, and maybe some implementation in work I do. And then getting to the trauma responsive level, where you're really working in intervention and prevention at a much more elevated level, avoiding reactivity and re-traumatization and things like that. And you're becoming a much more elevated practitioner. And then, of course, the kind of other school of thought around the healing-centered approach too. But I agree, in terms of any of those kind of levels, or layers of it, that training for school staff, all school staff who need this,
Right.
has to be sustainable and consistent. It can't be about checking boxes. It has to be really targeted to that school's children, that school's demographics and family histories, the historical knowledge attached to that particular environment, and really tailored every single time for what that environment and community needs. And then it is ongoing, so that the capacities are always being built in the people servicing the students and families. So I want to share that kind of first as some context. But at a deeper level, what you're talking about here, there's a lot neurobiologically, right? You mentioned IFS, and there are all different types of things. Somatic therapy and IFS and EMDR, all these critical mental health strategies, techniques, approaches. And I'm not a therapist. I have the benefit to work with many of them in many different kind of contexts. But because teachers aren't working neurobiologically at any given time, right? They're in the moment. They're pouring in so much. Stakes are high, whether it be testing stakes, observations and evaluation stakes, just trying to help a child pass who's struggling. I kind of layered out from a trauma responsive and healing centered mentality around three different areas that educators at any level can be aware of so they can monitor, bring awareness to self first, and from those places make changes and really make adjustments to approaches. So it's really around three things: emotional regulation, hyperarousal, and what's called interoceptive awareness. So, if we talk, and I'll keep it like at a digestible level. So, kids have big feelings all the time. A 12th grader or a kindergartner have big feelings all the time in many different ways. And whether it be puberty and adolescence that help them kind of manage and function through that, or a complete inability to access and understand any way to cope with it. They experience big feelings, just like us as adults. So the emotional regulation piece is really all about those big feelings that happen and how to learn how to manage those feelings when they happen. Trying to give students, trauma sensitive spaces, we can call them, school-wide sensory or regulation spaces, as well as like very predictable, manageable, clear expectations, boundaries, and guidelines that staff can thrive within and the kids can thrive within, in order to, accept the feelings for what they are, to meet those feelings and validate them where they are in ourselves and in our kids, and then be able to work on managing those, whether it might be through a social story. It might be through how you're using your proximity and your voice. It might be co-regulation, like techniques where we're both practicing posture and breathing, attitude and pacing, avoiding some kind of power struggle and really connecting on a human level. So that managing of those feelings first, identifying what the feelings are, what they feel like, acknowledging that it's okay to have them, and then what do we do with them from there? That hyperarousal piece, happens when we get to such an elevated state that I don't know what to do with myself in one form or another, right? Sometimes that has attached to it. This whole thing has attached to it, the old amygdala hijack that everyone talks about, that fight, flight, freeze, or appease or fawn, where I'm trapped, like almost like behind, museum glass or in ice or in amber, where I'm frozen and don't know what to do, or I'm so reactive. All kinds of things could possibly happen because I'm so at an elevated state that I've crashed or exploded, one extreme or another kind of place, at a hyper elevated state. And so we have those two things going on there where we get caught in some level of extremes while learning how to manage these big feelings in ourselves and our kids. And then right in the middle of that is this interesting tool around this interoceptive awareness, which is like the ability to begin to learn about your cues, your triggers, the sensitivities, the feelings that start to begin to happen when you are triggered, or when we see a child who's triggered, and how to move in gently, lovingly, compassionately, safely to navigate that with them. So it might be for an adult, the back of your neck gets hot. Start to, bounce a leg or bite fingers, or like you can just feel your jaw clench and start to grind teeth when a student or someone at your employer or the child or a spouse or a person driving down the street, just that little elevation, something has started to happen. I often kind of talk about this like a rubber band theory, where if you stretch a rubber band really long, right, and it gets to that white place, that like bink, like that high point of tension, when you've been triggered, I feel like And I see this in my students. I see it with staff. I felt it with myself. It's that bing, it's that place right there where something could snap, that you have to be aware when you start to stretch. That's the place interoceptively that you're trying to be aware of, that something is starting to happen and I need to take a step back, a step away, or do something for myself to check my internal systems and match them with what I'm showing or demonstrating, and try to create some balance there, some mindful awareness, some
Right.
sensitivity, in order to make a decision to protect myself, those around me, my environment, and give myself a way out, or help a student find a way out of that. Um, and so I found that understanding those three places in this work, and really targeting on the interoceptive awareness, the feelings, sensations, ideas, that things that start to happen when one becomes upset, becomes triggered, becomes elevated, starts to move into a dysregulated place or space, and finding tools to meet those things is a great, like, jumping off point that can be used in the moment, in a classroom, on the recess playground, in a hallway, in a cafeteria, and can be very, powerful and useful to, like, support ourselves and our own safety, and especially kids in the environment as well.
I feel like the system for most educators, which is very much a test crazy paradigm of we were chasing test scores, and then maximizing, bell to bell from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, from pre-K through 12th grade, just really maximizing the whole system, or sort of configuring it in a way where the algorithm, whether we like it or not, the algorithm says we're gonna measure your success based on these test scores. I feel like that system in many cases prevents school leaders from really investing in the cultivation of mindful awareness, because for me at least, mindful awareness can't be done in like a mindful minute like that you do at the beginning of the day and someone plays some chimes. And I mean, those can be helpful as reminders throughout the day, but actually cultivating, actually doing the changing the neural structures and the capacity to pay attention to the present moment without judgment, that in my mind requires an investment of time that it seems like schools are almost allergic to. Can you talk about how we can, as educators, advocate for the kind of system that allows us to sort of honor people's humanity and give them time to engage in those healing centered practices, whether it's mindfulness or yoga or whatever it is, breath work, you mentioned breath work, or a combination of those things, whatever works for people. How do we advocate for a system that allows us to do that without feeling like, uh-oh, but what about test scores?
I think that is definitely a significant challenge, where we're looking at academic performance and trying to elevate that in K to 12 education, where we see so much deficit, so much areas of concern, while trying to prioritize, mental health, wellness, social emotional success. I think, you know, systemically, in any school system, nationally, federally, however you want to look at it, I think I think there's some questions maybe that I would guide the framing with first, around any decision making that happens, any policy that's going to be developed at a local, state, or federal level, around the decisions at any particular school, as one looks at baseline first, right? What are we? Where are we? And I mean academically, as well as climate, culture, and the social emotional lives of our children. We get a baseline sense of all that. We audit, in essence, that piece of ourselves as a school, or as a county, as a state, as a nation, whatever it might be, right? We look at that first, and then determine from there, based on the experiences of our students, our family, and our staff, where do we want to go and be in terms of the academic rigor and performance increases, as well as the cultural competence, as well as the emotional competency of our students and staff, et cetera. So I think you have to be able to say, like, the decisions we're going to make. One, do they increase a feeling of safety? One, does it offer choice instead of punishment? Is there autonomy instead of discipline? And I get it. I support it. I believe in it. There has to be accountability models and mechanisms around student codes of conduct and how students conduct themselves as young people to be globally minded, civically conscious adults in the world with rules and laws to follow to keep themselves and others safe. And there have to be disciplinary and behavioral interventions in place that is critical for safety and security. But is there choice and autonomy where kids can make mistakes, fail, do things, and have a chance for fresh starts as well, especially dysregulated bodies and harmed children who are in trauma? 3, does whatever we're doing regulate nervous systems for our adults as well as our children? Does it help to de-escalate the concepts that we're concerned about in that baseline to get us to our desired goal states? Does it regulate people and their nervous systems? Does it reduce shame, build equity, and eliminate power struggle in what we're doing? And would a child in trauma, would the 11th grader with performance test anxiety, or the 5th grader who has a parent who passed away coming to this country in a really violent immigrant-based experience, or the 7th grader who's transitioning in terms of their gender identity, would those children feel safer here in the environment we're creating, or more threatened? And would the adults that we're placing in these places to train, to support, to guide, to onboard, would they also feel safe and supported enough to do this kind of work, or feel psychologically unsafe and threatened? If the answer is no to any of those, as we're working through these processes, then I think we're on, like rocky footing for even attempting to build any kind of, sensitive, healing-centered, sensitive space, trauma-sensitive space. Because by design, like, we have to shift mentality, around the old Western models of control. We have to move from control to care.
Yeah.
And from compliance to like operationalizing love in our work. There's still boundaries. Kids in trauma need those. Dysregulated people need those. There's still accountability. There's still rules. There's still laws. There's still guidelines to follow. Kids need that. They need those structures just like adults do. But do those kids have at least adults who care for them deeply and know them and connect with them and work with them? And do the adults have those kind of same peer mechanism structures? Are people showing up in ways that they're emotionally present in? And do they have mechanisms to seek help and connection and safety when they don't? And is that county or district or system or state prioritizing compliance or connection?
Right.
And at those things. There are important pieces in all of it. Having been a teacher for 20 plus years and been an administrator for quite some time now, there are important pieces in all of it, and everyone's role makes the whole community go. So I understand over testing, and I think there's a lot of it, but there certainly needs to be assessments created, equitable ones, culturally responsive ones that really speak to kids' true lived experiences to measure their emotional intelligence, their cognitive intelligence, their abilities to survive and thrive in the world. And so I think all of that is important from a performance-based standpoint, from academic, framing. But without the other component, none of that will ever happen or truly thrive.
That's right.
In my opinion.
Without the healing, it's like you can't put the cart before the horse. It's like if you're not, we knew this from Maslow. So if we're not taking care of both educators and students' basic needs, their mental health needs, their physical health needs, they can't possibly achieve everything we want them to achieve. So even if you think the primary goal of school is just academic achievement, even if you're one of these people that deifies test scores. But you can't get those test scores with students whose trauma hasn't been addressed. You just can't get there. Like, it would be nice if we it'd be nice if we could, but that just won't happen. And so that's why even if your argument is schools are about academics, about the reading, writing, arithmetic, you can't get there. You can't get where you want without that kind of healing.
I agree. I think, the word healing always has to come with change. I think, as you heal, you change and transform. Um, and when there is healing, then you can pursue, I think, actively change in various forms. Um, I tell students a lot this idea that, like, that practice makes permanent, not perfect. There's no such thing, right? So there's that healing, those changes are far from perfect. They're messy, they're miraculous, and they're messy. And so you we're working to create as we heal in permanent habits. We're trying to create environments, build systems, policies, practices, procedures, whatever word you want to use, that amplify student and staff voice.
Right.
Because when people get heard, like when they're heard, not just like listened to, when they're heard, like the nervous system settles.
Yeah.
There's a collective sigh of comfort and safety and peace. And when voice gets silenced, hands go up, resistance, the brow furrows, the heart tightens, the jaw clenches, like resistance becomes the norm, and that can't exist in trauma sensitive, trauma informed, trauma, compliance, like it can't exist in those spaces.
Yeah.
And shouldn't.
Yeah. We're running out of time. We're kind of already a little bit over, but I do want to give you an opportunity to, promote anything that you said. You mentioned a book and any articles, anything you'd like to promote, and anything we haven't touched base on yet, on yet, that you'd like to make sure we say before we sign off.
Oh, well, I would say I'm really grateful for the time to be here with you. And I probably, say to everyone, anybody who's listening or who's going to pick this up and listen, like, thank you for the work that you're showing up to do every single day. 50% of every single interaction is your responsibility. 50%. So the difference in being here is you. Thank you so much for listening, for showing up, for being a part of this with us, for engaging in this work in love and compassion and courage, and showing up in those ways. Yeah, I have a book. It's called Heart Leader, A Trauma Responsive Approach to Teaching, Leading, and Building Community. Please, I'd love for you to check it out. But more importantly, reach out to me. If you want to connect, if you have questions, problems of practice, things you want to connect on or discuss, let's have a conversation. I'm a partner with you in this work, and you're not alone in it. There are hundreds of thousands of us willing to show up with you and stand with you in this work, because we know how much we care about it and how important it is to safeguard and be a part of saving lives and educating them and loving them to better spaces. So I really am grateful for the time today. And please reach out to me at social media, email, connect with me. I'm happy to be a partner with you. And Todd, thank you so much for being a partner with me here.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. And I put a link to your book in the chat. So folks who are watching, if you're interested in reading Matthew's book, it's the link is in there. And as always, appreciate your time tonight, Matthew, and appreciate what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the courage that it's taken you to overcome some of the experiences you've had and now you're in a position where you can help other adults and young people dealing with some of that same kind of trauma and yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work to continue to see all the pain and suffering in the world and to show up and meet that with like you said, love and compassion. It's and not feel hollowed out and burned out in the process. So appreciate your the work that you're doing and hopefully everybody who's listening, who's engaged in that work, spends time taking good care of themselves, because it is easy to get that through that vicarious trauma to really just feel a sense of like I can't take anymore, especially with everything we're seeing in the country and we're hearing about in the news. It's just it's hard to take all that in and absorb it all. It's a lot. So I just caution everybody to take good care of themselves. Thank you so much, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everybody, that was Matthew Bowerman. I just want to encourage everybody to check out the comments. And if you're interested, you can read his book, order and read his book, and check that out. And if you are interested in learning more about trauma-informed education, you can go to the cool website. It's cool.us/trauma. It's right there. And we've got some videos, and we'll post this live stream there as well. But there's also videos from some of the leading thinkers, Bessel van der Kolk, Dr. Gabor Mate. There are several videos there and some information if you're interested in just learning more. And for those of you in South Carolina, Columbia College has a master's in trauma-informed education. And I've heard nothing but good things about that program. So I want to encourage you, if you want to dive even deeper into a master's level program, you can check out that program at Columbia College. A few things I want to share with you before we sign off. We've got several events coming up. One is the SCEA and the CHS hotline are going to be presenting an ICE response and Know Your Rights for educators and administrators. This will be on Thursday, the 5th, that's tomorrow at 5:30 in Goose Creek, and on Wednesday, the 18th at 5:30 in North Charleston. You can go to tinyurl.com/educator session, or you can scan that QR code. You can just pause this video if you're watching it and scan that code, just so you know your rights, and so that you know your students' rights as well. And we also have a building rep training coming up this Saturday, 9 a.m. to 12 o'clock. That's the virtual session. The in-person one is on Saturday, the 21st, from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And this is for folks who are working at a school and don't have a representative yet. See, the SCEA, we are building out these local structures because we believe you have to advocate at the local level. That starts in your building. And we would love to see a building rep at every single public school in the state of South Carolina. So if you're interested in that, you can scan the QR code or you can email Ellen at eGiovanazzo. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, but you can just scan that QR code and register and learn what it takes to become a building rep in your school building. Also coming up, we have annual lobby days. Aspiring educators is going to be Wednesday the 18th. Active educators Wednesday the 25th, and retired educators Wednesday the 25th. You can sign up using that QR code, or you can just pause and type in that URL, that long URL, that form.jotform.com/ a bunch of numbers. And also, we want you to save the date. We have our spring conference coming up. It's going to be March 6th and 7th at the SCEA headquarters in West Columbia, South Carolina. There's going to be door prizes, praxis prep, curriculum development design, leadership and school culture, SEL stuff, similar to some of the stuff we talked about on the live stream tonight. We're going to be celebrating our Teachers of the Year. There's going to be musical entertainment, keynote speakers. So save that date, March 6th through 7th, our spring conference with the SCEA. So we hope to see everybody there. Thanks again to Dr. Matthew Bowerman for his time tonight. Thank you for tuning in. The last little bit I want to share with you is, if you are on Instagram, you can check out, what we'll do is, with a lot of these live streams, we create little bite-sized pieces. So if you don't have time to watch the whole live stream, we try to cut it up into highlights, and we post those along with a lot of other cool stuff that Alex Del Castillo is doing over on Instagram. Just go to Instagram, search for the SCEA, or you can type in that URL. We're also on TikTok, and the same type of content is there, tiktok.com/@the-SCEA. And the last thing I want to promote, and I haven't promoted this in a while, is if you're interested in systems change, if you're interested in looking at what would it be like if a school actually honored the humanity of its educators and students, like actually engaged in the healing-centered practices and embedded that not as like a mindful moment, but throughout the day and throughout their work with the staff and the students, and just was sort of coded into that algorithm, not just chasing test scores, but actually humanized education. I want to invite you to check out the documentary I created. It's about 2 schools in Floyd County, Virginia, in rural Virginia. It's called, and you can go to cool.us/rehumanizing school. You can watch, there's 4 episodes. Those episodes are around 15 minutes in length. 2 of the episodes feature Blue Mountain School, which is a elementary school here in Floyd County, and 2 feature Springhouse Community School, which is the high school there in Floyd County. So want to encourage you to check out that documentary, and love to hear your feedback on it. You can push back. You can tell me you don't like it. It's fine. But I would love for folks to check that out and engage in conversation around that. So thanks again. Also, one last thing, is I would regret it if I did not mention this, which is Cool Coach. Induction teachers in public schools in South Carolina. So you do not have to be a member. It's at no cost to you. It's all done online. It's all one-to-one. It's confidential. All you have to do is log on sometime between 6 and 8 every Tuesday and Thursday night. So you can log on at 7:12 or at 6:13, whatever. Just log on sometime between 6 and 8 between Tuesday and Thursday at cool.us/coaching. And then you'll be put into one of the breakout rooms with Angie, Stephanie, or Marcella, and you can ask them questions. You can get feedback. You can vent and get the help and resources that you need and the coaching that you need to help you in your career. Because we all could use sort of an unbiased source of support every now and then. And maybe you don't feel like asking your administrator or a colleague because it's just something you'd rather keep kind of private. That's what Cool Coaching is for, is that opportunity for you to reach out to somebody who's not working in your building for support. Again, that's cool.us/coaching. Thanks again to Dr. Matthew Bowerman. Thank you for tuning in to our live stream tonight. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to be having a live stream with our folks from Scene. And until then, have a great couple of weeks. And hopefully we'll see you at one of our events with the SCEA. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.